Part 72. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 713. On the first day, the little bear strode, and when he came back at night, he hugged his mother's waist and cried. When he was sleeping, he hugged his leg and screamed for pain. Just when Mu Yangling felt that he couldn't hold on, he got up early the next morning, crying while dressing himself, and then took his father's hand to the martial arts hall. Mu Yangling was heartbroken watching this, and almost couldn't bear to leave the child behind, but Chi Heiran felt very sad in his heart. Now Xiaoxiang is practicing martial arts with Chi Heiran on the side to supervise and teach, and she will provide soup and water. When he comes back at night, she will personally soak him in a medicinal bath, and Chi Heiran will rub his legs. The two coax him together. When Chi Heiran was this age, only Fan Zijian, who was also a child, was by his side. When he was practicing martial arts, no one did these things. As for the Xia family, Mu Yangling sighed. At that time, the Xia family was probably too busy to take care of themselves, and there were only a few who could take care of the two children. Mu Yangling suddenly understood the brotherhood between Chi Heiran and Fan Zijian, and also understood Fan Zijian's attitude towards the Xia family. If Fan Zijian grew up without Chi Heiran by his side, maybe he would hold on tightly to his mother who cared about him, but just because Chi Heiran was by his side, Xia's hesitation would be glaring, and her care would be cheap. If it was an ordinary child, maybe they wouldn't care or wouldn't notice it at all, but Fan Zijian was too smart and too precocious. The conflict between him and the Xia family never broke out, but it always existed, which made it like this now. But no matter how bad Fan Zijian was, he still had a mother by his side, and Chi Heiran, his mother was dead, his father was like that, and his elder brother couldn't take care of himself. Mu Yangling felt heartbroken just thinking about it. It seems that her childhood was considered good. Although there were situations where she couldn't eat enough and didn't wear warm clothes, her father was responsible, her mother loved her, and there was an obedient and cute girl underneath. Younger brother. When Mu Yangling thought about it, he felt that he was extremely happy, which made Chi Heiran even more pitiful. Therefore, when the father and son came back from practicing martial arts, they saw the star-eyed and enthusiastic Mu Yangling. The dinner table is full of dishes that father and son like to eat, and there is only one vegetarian dish. Chi Heiran suppressed his saliva, looked up at Mu Yangling, and said, "Aling, just tell me if you have anything, don't worry, no matter what happens I don't blame you." Xiaoxiang was much more straightforward, directly forked a braised lion's head into his bowl, raised his head and said obediently, "Mother, I am obedient, I am a good boy." After finishing speaking, he stuffed the lion's head into his mouth, and started to eat voraciously. While eating, he made a contented murmur, which made Chi Heiran really want to throw this kid out. Mu Yangling was still feeling sad, so he decided not to be as knowledgeable as Chi Heiran. While showing a gentle smile to Xiaoxiang, he picked up chopsticks for Chi Heiran's favorite braised pork and said, "I'm fine, I just feel that it's been hard work, so I personally cook for you to cook some dishes that you like, come and taste how it tastes." Chi Heiran hesitated, "Are you really fine? Don't worry, no matter how much trouble you make, the Lord will take care of it for you." Mu Yangling couldn't help staring. "Eat as soon as I tell you, why are you talking so much nonsense? I didn't cause trouble, but my hands were itchy and I wanted to cook, you know." Chi Heiran was instantly relieved after being yelled at, and comfortably picked up his favorite dish and ate it with a snort. Chi Heiran, whom Mu Yangling never knew, had a tendency to be abused, so he had to scold him to feel comfortable. According to Chi Heiran's prediction, the Dali envoys arrived outside the capital 2 days later. They stopped at the post station outside the city to rest and wait for the envoys from Dali to receive them. Chi Heiran was released. He took the copied book and handed it in. Chi Ziyuan flipped through it and knew that it was the last time. Didn't say anything, just threw the things aside and said, "You have dealt with the Prince of Dali, and you have kindness to him. This time, you and the Life and Academy of the Ministry of Rights will receive him together. The time for the prince to be appointed is set at on the 12th of September, you can discuss with them whether the concubine Xian should be conferred first or later, the queen and I have no objection, as long as the time is not too close." Qi Heiran complied. Duan Siwen only thought about it for a while and decided to set the time before the prince canonization. The big officials in Daki's borderlands returned to Beijing one after another to participate in the prince's ceremony. Compared with the prince, their ownership of Dali is much lighter. After the prince's ceremony, they must return to their posts, and it is impossible to stay to participate in the ceremony concubine's concubine. That being the case, it is better to set the time ahead, even if it is a warm-up for the crown prince's appointment. It is worse than being blinded by the crown prince's brilliance. But they definitely can't choose September. Duan Siwen thought about it, and chose August 25th, which is not too high or low, during the few good days sent by Qin Tianjian. And in 2 days it will be the Mid-Autumn Festival banquet. Qi Heiran sent Dali and his party to Li Fanyuan to settle down, and then left, but Jing Zhong set off a frenzy because of the Dali envoy's entry into Beijing, and the eyes of those who had been staring at Xiaobao and Bear all looked away. The eldest prince's position as the crown prince had been secretly decided when the emperor postponed the selection of concubines for him. Over the past year or so, the rarity has passed, but there is a virtuous concubine in the Dali envoy group. Now there is only one empress in the harem, and the appearance of this virtuous concubine has broken the phenomenon of the middle palace dominating the harem for more than a year. I just don't know if it can break the monopoly. So everyone set their sights on the Lifen courtyard, and really wanted to take a look at the appearance of this virtuous concubine in advance. Those who are well informed and quick-minded know that this virtuous concubine was once rescued by Princess Rongjun and lived in the general's mansion in Qianan for a long time. One point, Mu Yangling also expressed depression. She thinks that she has always been gentle, generous, and obedient to the outside world. Why are everyone so afraid of her? Mu Yangling feels that she has been implicated by Qi Heiran, and Qi Heiran has no idea about this. Heiran's answer is to give her the back of the head directly. Closer to home, everyone didn't dare to ask Princess Rongjun, so they went to Xiao Xia, who was also in Qianan and lived next door. Xiao Xia has a good temper, and she can't bear to refuse petitioners who are older than her, but she is pregnant, and entertaining guests is unavoidably tiring, and her face is a little tired after only 2 days. Fan Zijin got angry when she saw it, and directly called the housekeeper to close the door. "Thank you, all the guests in the back house are not allowed to enter." In this way, it is inevitable to offend others. Qi Heiran happened to be there, and waved his hand indifferently. "Why bother to suffer that crime? Just pack up your things and move them to my place. Anyway, there is no one in your room to host. When the time comes, cousin sister-in-law, you ran back to find your aunt after you started it. Let Aling take care of her. There is Imperial Dr. Wang in my yard, so nothing will happen." It just so happens that Aling has been busy recently, and the emperor's wife is busy with the Mid-Autumn Festival banquet and the canonization of the virtuous concubine. And I don't have time to talk to Aling, so let the two of them go as companions. Fan Zijin looked at Nani Xia with deep eyes, and Nani Xia immediately knelt down and said, "Your servant, go back and pack your things." The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 714. Xiao Xia breathed a sigh of relief when he heard the news. "Those people cannot be offended. My wife, you have a big belly now. Even if the concubine is here, she won't blame you if you say you can't entertain her. What's more, those orders are not as high as yours. The most important thing now is you and your belly children here. Don't be afraid of offending people. Those people are really going to get annoyed. They don't know what is good or bad, and don't know the world. They know that you are pregnant, but they swarm here, and the pictures are just those seats in the harem. It seems that among the wives, which family does not have one or two young girls who have not yet been married? Nani Xia is the wet nurse assigned by the Xia family to the Xiao Xia family. She also served the pen and ink in front of the Xia family's Grand Master and Tai Furen. She looked at her like eyeballs, so Madame Xia, who has always been favored by the master and wife, and has a calm and honest temper, was sent to Xiao Xia's side as a nurse. But I don't know if it's because the Xia family loves her too much and keeps her at home so she doesn't see anyone, so she has a cowardly appearance, or it's just her nature. This aunt is kind-hearted, naive, and timid. It's not easy to be a queen, so Mrs. Tai passed her dowry over the masters, wives, and young masters, and left it directly to Xiao Xia's. Master Xia and Mrs. Xia were even more worried about her marriage and turned their heads until they were 16. Seeing that they were getting older, they fell in love with Fan Zijin. At that time, Fan Zijin was divorced by the family of the servant of the household department. It was a time of depression. The Xia family liked Fan Zijin's character. Although he had some conflicts with his father, the Xia family only had him as a son. His daughter married to get along with her mother-in-law and her husband. It's not getting along with the father-in-law. As for whether Fan Zijin became an official, the Xia family didn't care at all. They just wanted their daughter to live a safe and happy life. In order to make Xiao Xia's life better, they even escorted Madame Xia's family over here, so that Madame Xia could work by Xiao Xia's side with peace of mind. You must know that Nani Xia is a servant of the Xia family. She has been in the Xia family for 5 generations and was given the surname Xia. This kind of servant is the rarest, and usually she would not accompany her daughter, but for this daughter, the Xia family easily sent her. Madame Xia was split out, and she also promised the status of Madame Xia's son as a good citizen. So no matter how tired Xia is, she has to plan for Xiao Xia, but as she gets older, how many years can she stay by Xiao Xia's side? In order to keep Xiao Xia's life stable for the rest of her life, she had to work hard on her own. Because Fan Zijin's growth was beyond the expectations of the Xia family, I thought that Fan Zijin had become more dependent on his wife's family, the Xia family, but who knew that under the new dynasty, Fan Zijin would directly change from a non-official Jinchi to a state prince. Therefore, everything can only depend on Xiao Xia himself. Mother Xia taught her in a low voice, "Our grandfather has grown up with the emperor since he was 12 years old, and even grew up eating and living with King Rongjun. The relationship between the 3 cousins is at stake. There, it can be said that in front of the emperor, besides King Rongjun, that is our duke, you need to give way to the one in the palace, that is, Princess Rongjun. Who else in this world is worthy of your humiliation? It's your mother-in-law. The duke's attitude is there. You just need to be right on the surface. Why bother yourself and your children?" Seeing Mrs. Xia meditating, Mammy Xia knew she had listened. She breathed a sigh of relief. She was not afraid that Mrs. Xia would not understand, but she was afraid that she would not listen, and if she did not understand, she would repeat it several times. But if she doesn't listen, she can't help it even if she tries her best. Madame Xia taught her again, Mama knows that you and Princess Duan are close, but this is the capital city, and the Empress in the palace is your serious relative. Also, when the Emperor married the Empress, our Lord helped organize the wedding banquet. The dowry was escorted by our Lord and King Rongjun together, and the relationship is no worse than that of Princess Duan. If you go to the Lifen court, wouldn't you slap the Empress in the face? Complain, why don't you wait a bit? Princess Rongjun has always been on good terms with the Queen, and this time it is King Rongjun who is my Daki's envoy. She must be going to the Lifen court to meet Princess Duan. When the time comes, you follow. Give more. Princess Duan just needs to add some makeup and tell her some news about the harem, and that will be the end of the friendship between the two of you. A Ling will go to see Yuking." "Yes," Madame Xia patted her hand reassuringly, and said, The Empress is a virtuous person, so sending a female official here will inevitably not be taken seriously enough, so she will send Princess Rongjun. You just have to prepare something for Princess Duan. In the past, the slaves were worried that you would be deliberately looking for Princess Rongjun, but now that the Duke has allowed you to live in the Qi mansion, everything is logical. He said again, this time, King Rongjun mentioned it first, which shows the relationship between him and the Duke of the country. In the future, you should be careful and walk around with Princess Rongjun more often. Xiao Xia nodded. Aling has a good temper, and I also like to play with her. Seeing that she is still a little girl, Grandma Xia can't help but sigh, but she is a little thankful. Although Princess Rongjun looks at the turmoil, her heart is also the most delicate and pure. It can be seen whether the truth is true or false, and her wife treats her sincerely. She will naturally treat each other sincerely, which is better than letting Xiao Xia pretend to be friends. The Xiaoxia family moved to the Qi mansion, and Mu Yangling arranged for him to live in a courtyard in the East mansion. Because the Qi mansion is small, it only takes a quarter of an hour to go back and forth, which is very convenient. Those who still wanted to visit the Duke's mansion suddenly choked as if they had swallowed 2 taels of rice. Fan Zijin sneered, and directly asked the housekeeper to suggest that they go to the people who had visited before. When those people thought about it, they also felt that the people who visited before had got the news they wanted to hear, and flocked away. Pitiful to those people before, because of Madame Xia's resistance and suggestions, they didn't get any useful value from the Xia family when they were young. They only knew Princess Dolly, the future virtuous concubine, who was very beautiful. Nonsense, of course the princess of a country will not be ugly, it is the same as not saying this. However, those who wanted to inquire about the news did not believe that the people in front of them only got this information, so they were able to inquire vigorously, making those who were visited miserable. Only then was Fan Zijin satisfied, and he waved his hand to let the housekeeper play freely, and he didn't care. Everyone was photographed because of the critical condition of Rong Junwang and his wife. They dared not go to the Qi mansion to inquire about news. Even the Su family and Xiao Wu family who had lived in the Qi mansion did not dare to come to the door. For more than a year, although the emperor did not do anything to them, but they also ignored it very much, and this alone made them live in trembling, so naturally they dared not seek their own death to find Qi Heiran. You know, unlike Qi Ziyuan's gentleness, Qi Heiran has never concealed his dislike for them. Therefore, compared with the hustle and bustle of the capital, the Qi mansion seems to be peaceful and independent from the outside world, and when Mu Yangling and Xiao Xia's family were enjoying this tranquility and eating melon seeds to watch the hustle and bustle of the capital, Li Jinghua's decree came to the Qi mansion. Li Jinghua asked Mu Yangling to visit Princess Dolly, the future virtuous concubine, on her behalf. Xiao Xia's heart was agitated, and she looked back excitedly at Nanny Xia, only to see Nanny Xia standing behind her with a calm expression and her head bowed respectfully. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 715. Although Xioxia's personality is weak, it's not that he doesn't envy those who are decisive and strategizing. The more people lack something, the more they want to become. Xiao Xia was no exception, but she never thought she could become like that, but Mother Xia said that she could teach her. Xiao Xia caressed her protruding belly and was slightly absent-minded. Mu Yangling had already received the gift list from the Queen to Princess Duan, and the female officer sent by the Queen was waiting respectfully in the outer hall. Mu Yangling went as an envoy, but he still had to follow the female official. When the time came, the female official would enter the palace and report back to the Queen. Mu Yangling pulled Xiao Xia into the room, and asked in a low voice, "Do you want to go with me?" Xiao Xia came back to her senses, nodded again and again, and said in a low voice, I also prepared some things for her. Then go get it quickly, we're leaving now. Mu Yangling checked the things prepared by the Xioxia family, and found that they were all jewelry, clothes, purses, etc. She picked up a purse and asked, "What's in it?" "It's some refreshing herbs, and there are 2 more spices," Xiao Xia replied while directing people to pack the things. "If you like it, I'll make some for you later." Xioxia's needlework is very good, and she made the purse for Princess Duan herself. Mu Yangling nodded. "When your child is born, make some for me, I think the flowers on it look very pretty." Duan Yuking also missed them very much, and ran out of the yard where she lived when she heard that they were here. She saw Xiao Xia's belly was getting bigger. She covered her mouth in surprise, and asked, "We haven't seen each other for 2 months, why is it so big?" Xiao Xia smiled contentedly. "After arriving in the capital, I grew up very quickly, but I think this is what pregnancy looks like. Before, the belly was so small that it couldn't be seen wearing loose clothes. It made me worry badly." Mu Yangling waited for them to greet each other before announcing the Queen's decree, pulled Duan Yuking up and smiled and said, "The Empress asked me to ask you if there is anything else that needs to be added to the Lifen courtyard. Just ask, anyway, you will be a family sooner or later people." Duan Yuking blushed, lowered her head and said in a low voice, "There is nothing I need, my brother has prepared everything for me." Mu Yangling signaled to the female officer behind him to bring the things up, and said, "This is the dress and crown prepared for you by the clan. The queen can't leave the palace, so I specially asked me to send it. There are also some jewelry that can be used by the concubine. Look back and see what else you need." Seeing that Duan Yuking just shook her head and said it was enough, Mu Yangling whispered in her ear, "Don't be embarrassed, getting married is a lifelong event, and you are directly named a virtuous concubine, which is of high grade. The relatives have to enter the palace to watch the ceremony. If the things are not enough or not good, it will inevitably be embarrassing." Duan Yuking hesitated. Mu Yangling glanced at Xiao Xia, and said, "Anyway, I'm not in a hurry to leave, why don't you think about it again, and make a list of what you want before I leave?" Duan Yuking breathed a sigh of relief, and hurriedly nodded in response. Mu Yangling asked someone to hand over the things and followed Duan Yuking into the house. When Duan Yuking saw that the female officials did not follow in, but had a place to rest, she was greatly relieved, and her expression became much calmer. Mu Yangling understands that even if a concubine Xian is a second-rank concubine, she is still a concubine when she enters the palace, and it is difficult for ordinary people to adapt to the princess of a country becoming a concubine. Mu Yangling knew that Duan Yuking and Xiao Xia were on good terms, so he asked to change clothes. Duan Yuking smiled gratefully at Mu Yangling, and asked a nanny to lead Mu Yangling away, while she dragged Xiao Xia into the house to talk about herself. At the same time, Duan Saiwen also received a message from her sister. After thinking about it for a while, he asked his staff to draw up a list, which was all the things he needed on the day he was appointed. It's not that they can't get these things out, but they have to enter the palace, and some things can't be mixed in. It's better to use the palace from the beginning, and it will save a lot of trouble at that time. Duan Saiwen was very satisfied with the queen's attitude, and he mentioned it specifically when he went to see his sister at night. It can be seen that the queen has good intentions for you. After entering the palace, you just live your own life. Just stand on the queen's side, don't get too involved, just express your opinion, no matter who becomes the emperor in the future, as long as I'm still here, you'll be fine." Duan Yuking already knew about her infertility, so she nodded and said, "Don't worry, brother, I know it well, but the queen is so generous that she even let Princess Rongjun come to see me. You must know that when the queen visits the concubines who are about to enter the palace, there are also particularities in rewarding things. If you send a young female official, it means that the queen's attitude is average, and even slightly contemptuous. If you send an old lady, it is probably to give the other party a bad impression and pick some mistakes in etiquette. If it is a family member from an ordinary clan, then it means that the queen is quite satisfied with the concubine she conferred, and expressed her importance. And this time the queen invited Princess Rongjun to come forward. She is not only a super-ranked imperial order, but also the queen's sister-in-law, the most noble woman in the current clan except the queen. Her arrival shows that the queen attaches great importance to and welcomes Princess Dolly. This is also the queen expressing her attitude to Dolly and Duan Yuking. Duan Siwen nodded, the empress is the only favorite in the palace. She can be neither arrogant nor impetuous under such circumstances. Either she is really generous, or she is deeply scheming. Anyway, you have no children in your life. The Princess of Rongjun and the Empress are on good terms. The Empress is sure of this, I also know, so as long as you honestly don't get involved in the subsequent seizure of the heirloom, you will be fine. Duan Yuking pouted, I already know, why do you have to bring it up again and again? Duan Siwen was helpless, aren't I afraid that you won't remember? He rubbed his sister's hair and sighed, in the past, my father and Queen Mother protected you too well. You were originally the only princess in Dolly. Your Majesty, no matter how you live, you will be fine, but who would have expected what will happen today? It can be seen that the old saying goes well, people have immediate worries without long-term considerations. Duan Yuking stuck out her tongue and promised, brother, don't worry, I will be obedient and won't get involved in those struggles for favor and succession, and Prince Daki is about to be established. Even if someone forces me, I will show my attitude standing on the orthodox side is, as you said, as long as Dolly is still there, as long as you are still there, big brother, I will be fine. Only then did Duan Siwen feel relieved, and said with a smile, I think you are on good terms with Mrs. Nguo, which saves me another worry. I was afraid that you would be bored if you were far away from home and could not see your family. Now that you after making friends, when you get bored, call her into the palace to talk and relieve boredom. Duan Yuking nodded slightly. And the female officer who returned to the palace whispered in the queen's ear, I see that Princess Duan is really as shy as Princess Rongjun said, but she is similar to Mrs. Nguo's personality, and they are the best. The queen nodded slightly, waved the female officer back, and asked Wen Kui beside her, when will the patriarch arrive? I heard that they set off with the family members of the Mu family, so they should be able to arrive before the canonization of the concubine Xian. The queen smiled and said, Aling doesn't know about this, right? Fourth uncle probably wanted to give her a surprise, and you tell the people below to keep their mouths shut. Don't show your mouth before that, lest fourth uncle blame us. Wen Kui smiled and said, the servant gave orders early in the morning, and no one dares to talk too much in front of Princess Rongjun. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 716. The corner of Mu Yangling's mouth twitched as he looked at the big and small standing in front of him, pointed at the little bear and said, change it for me immediately. With his head held high and his chest held high, little bear shouted righteously, no change. Chi Heiran pretended to persuade little bear, son, be good, your mother told you to change it, so you can change it. Little bear said righteously, I don't. Mu Yangling glared at Chi Heiran, don't think that I don't know that you asked your son to change into the suit, you hurry up and let him change the clothes, we are going to the palace to attend the Mid-Autumn Festival banquet, not you want to hold a wedding, what are you doing wearing so red? Forget about Chi Heiran, he is dressed in a vermilion robe, tall, like a tall rock and tall and pine, like a jade handsome, but standing next to the little bear in a bright red short suit, it looks a little funny, the little bear is wearing a red short suit, even the hat on her head is red, and her chubby face is slightly bulging. When she hugs her out, people think that Fuwa came from somewhere. Especially the father and son are 7 or 8 points alike, Chi Heiran used to have baby fat, his son is now young, inherited from his chubby face, very cute. The key is that Chihayron is not as fat as a baby now, and his face is much tougher. When he was stern and not smiling, he still had 3 points of majesty. Now he is smiling, and he is holding a son like a fuwa. In the scarlet dress, Mu Yangling already had a premonition that everyone was looking at their family of 3 before he went. Chihayron was wearing a royal dress, only vermilion and purple, and vermilion was more homely. Although it was the Mid-Autumn Festival, the weather was still a bit stuffy. Mu Yangling didn't want him to wear a big dress at this time, that would be too suffer. And at the Mid-Autumn night banquet, he had to entertain Dolly envoys, so he couldn't wear other clothes. She couldn't force Chihayron, she could only let Xiaoxiang change this red body, at least not to make the father and son too conspicuous, but the elder brother said, let them keep a low profile lately. But Xiaoxiang refused to change, and there was another Chihayron who seemed to be helping, but tried his best to encourage Xiaoxiang to fight, and Mu Yangling was defeated. The little bear looked at his father triumphantly. He defeated his mother by repeating 2 sentences throughout the whole process. Sure enough, his father was right. He was the natural enemy of his mother. When he saw his father winking at him, he immediately ran into the room with high spirits. According to his father's instructions, he excitedly rummaged through boxes and cabinets, completely ignoring his father who winked and made his eyes cramp. Mu Yangling saw his son suddenly ran to his inner room, and quickly followed him in. Seeing him rummaging through boxes and cabinets to find things, Mu Yangling hurriedly picked him up. What are you looking for? Mother will find it for you. Little bear thumped to get down to the ground. I'm looking for clothes. Mu Yangling said helplessly but also happily, your clothes are not here. Xiaoxiang agreed to change clothes. Mom, will you change into a blue short suit for you? It's also very energetic. I don't, little bear shouted, I want to change it for my mother. Chihayron moved lightly, stood in front of a cabinet, and pointed to one of the drawers calmly. Seeing that, the little bear struggled even more, and shouted, behind Daddy. Mother changed new clothes. Dad said let's wear new clothes together. He sold his father out in an instant. Mu Yangling glared at Chihayron angrily. Chihayron's cautious expression immediately became upright, and he raised his neck and said, my son and I are both wearing red. What do you look like wearing blue? Anyway, you also have red clothes, don't you? You lied to me. I asked Lishun specifically, you made a new set of red autumn clothes. Anyway, your female relatives are not required to wear formal clothes, it is better to wear red casual clothes, others will know that we are a family. The little bear's little head was bit by bit, and he looked at his mother eagerly, it's a family. Mu Yangling looked at his son's big wet eyes, and he couldn't be immune at once. Seeing something interesting, Chihayron immediately turned around and took out Mu Yangling's autumn clothes that hadn't reached his upper body, and said with a smile, lady, come, for your husband you change clothes? Mu Yangling threw the father and son out and changed his clothes. Mu Yangling sat in front of the bronze mirror and looked at the beautiful woman in the mirror. He pursed his lips and said, I remember a set of ruby jewelry. Ornament is a ruby the size of a longan. Li Chun smiled and said, there is such a thing. It is the bride price given to you by the prince. You brought it here as a dowry. Because you don't like complicated jewelry, you kept it all the time. You brought it when you went south. If you want dye, this servant will look for it now, but fortunately that set of jewelry is precious, and has been kept in a box by itself, and it will follow us wherever we go. Mu Yangling nodded slightly, go find it. Anyway, it's already conspicuous enough, so let's make it even more colorful. Mu Yangling smiled slightly, it is the only county palace in Daki anyway, so why not be too cowardly? Lishun quickly found the set of ruby jewelry. The largest ruby was the size of a longan, and the smallest was as big as a little finger. All of them were plump and shiny, and they were all top grade. This was the Prince Jin's courtyard where Qi Heiran rushed into Jingzhou mansion. Snatched it? Li Shun carefully put the last ruby forehead ornament on Mu Yangling. The person in the mirror smiled at her. The person who was as beautiful as an orchid suddenly became as gorgeous as a peony. Li Shun was so surprised that he lost his words for a moment. Murmured, "Your Majesty, you are so beautiful." Mu Yangling smiled and said, "It seems that I really have to dress up properly, otherwise I will stare at you all and who will serve me?" Li Chun couldn't help but blushed, and took out a pair of ruby earrings from the makeup box beside her and said, "Your Majesty, please wear these earrings, they are more suitable than the pair of ruby earrings." When Mu Yangling put it on, his face became more and more like a silver basin, as beautiful as a peony. Qi Heiran was waiting impatiently and ran in with his son on his back. Mu Yangling turned his head when he heard the movement. With Mu Yangling, the little bear also stared blankly at his mother, feeling no pain from being scratched by his father. Until he got into the carriage, Qi Heiran still couldn't recover. He peeked at Mu Yangling with a dazed expression on his face. The little bear has confirmed that the other party is his mother. At this time, he is sitting obediently in Mu Yangling's arms, looking at her with a pair of round eyes, and touching the pimple on Mu Yangling's forehead with his small hands from time to time. "Ruby, it looks like she wants to pull it off." Mu Yangling had no choice but to avoid his hands slightly, squeezed his earlobe and said, "You are not allowed to tear the jewelry on your mother's head, do you understand?" Little Xiong nodded obediently, and said, "Mother is beautiful." Mu Yangling pursed his lips and smiled. Qi Heiran's eyes became straighter, and the little bear gnawed Mu Yangling directly, which shows how consistent the father and son's aesthetics are. Qi Heiran stared at the little bear, moved his hands, still didn't throw the kid out, but took the initiative to change his position, sat next to Mu Yangling, took the little bear out of her arms and hugged him. His face was slightly red and said, "Don't be tired." Mu Yangling couldn't help but ponder, the magic power of a set of jewelry, is it because of her natural beauty, or this set of jewelry makes her look good? So much so that the person next to the pillow has been amazed for such a long time after 5 years of marriage. Although Mu Yangling doesn't wear makeup or powder, he never wrongs himself. He never lacks necessary maintenance and grooming. He washes his face with milk and goat's milk every 3 days, and puts on an ecological mask by himself every 3 days. Although she is plain-faced, she often changes her hairstyle and never lacks jewelry. Although they are mainly simple, there are also many exquisite and ingenious ones, and Qi Heiran is not seen staring at her in a daze. Could it be that this guy prefers the flamboyant type instead of his usual elegant type? The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 717. As soon as he got off the carriage, Qi Heiran put away the stupefied look on his face, and became a little more indifferent. He got off the carriage with the little bear in his arms, and then turned around to help Mu Yangling get off the carriage. A servant hurried over, bent down, and said flatteringly, "My lord, you and Lord An's family can enter the palace in a carriage. If you don't like to ride in a carriage, this servant will ask someone to bring you here." Qi Heiran waved his hand, "Master, walk in, isn't Kuagong's family here?" We're here, we're talking to the Duke of Wei, this servant will lead you there." Qi Heiran had already seen Fan Zijian and Rongxian, waved his hands and said, "No need, you ask someone to carry a sedan chair over here." He hugged the little bear and took Mu Yangling over. The female relatives waiting next to her saw a flash of surprise in Mu Yangling's eyes, and then hurriedly bowed her knees to salute. Mu Yangling nodded slightly and walked to Mrs. Rong and Xiao Xia's side, and the two also bowed their knees to salute Mu Yangling. Mu Yangling supported Xiao Xia, pulled him back, and said with a smile, "Do we still want these courtesy?" Xiao Xia was also a little distracted when she saw Mu Yangling. Because it was Mid-Autumn Festival, she was going back to Fan Mansion with Fan Zijian, so she came out of Fan Mansion just now, but when she left in the morning, Ling was not so bright and charming. How did it take half a day for people to become so beautiful? Mrs. Rong and Mu Yangling don't see each other very often, but they came back to their senses the fastest, and said with a smile, "The princess is so beautiful, I didn't pay attention to it before, but now I see it, I almost can't take my eyes away." Fan Zijin kept glancing at Mu Yangling, and then looked up and down Chi Heiran and the little bear in his arms. Seeing that Chi Heiran was making the little bear call someone with a smile on his face, he called Uncle Cousin 3 times. The corners of Fan Zijin's mouth twitched, guessing the reason, he tugged Chi Heiran's sleeve, and whispered in his ear, "You'd better restrain yourself, be careful that big cousin will clean you up for the festival." Chi Heiran said unconvinced, "What's wrong with letting Xiao Xiang recognize him? He is the young son of Rongjun Wangfu, how can he not know the important ministers of the court? I have a reason to say that I will go." Fan Zijin saw that he looked like his only son, and immediately had a headache, so he decided to put his hand away. Anyway, there was a big cousin on top, so let him go to have a headache. When Fan Zijin thought about it, he completely relaxed, treated it as an ordinary feast, and looked at everyone leisurely. The servant carried the sedan chair and rushed over. Chi Heiran waved to Fan Zijin, "Hurry up and help my cousin up, let's go in quickly, there are still many people waiting behind." Fan Zijin was slightly surprised, "Is this for Xiao Xia?" Chi Heiran looked at him like an idiot, "Who else needs a sedan chair here besides my cousin?" Fan Zijin glanced at Mu Yangling, because Chi Heiran loved Mu Yangling so much that he didn't even prepare a sedan chair for her. Chi Heiran explained in a low voice, "Many old ladies will come to the Mid-Autumn Festival banquet this time. They didn't sit in the sedan chair. Wouldn't it be eye-catching if Ling sat? The cousin is pregnant, so it is only natural to sit in the sedan chair. As it should be." Fan Zijin gave him a look of "You are interested," and the group went to Zhaoyang Hall together, where the Mid-Autumn Festival banquet was held. The Rongjun Prince's mansion and his party left, and the people behind followed slowly. They had already arrived at the gate of the palace, but if the Nobler and Kuagong and Wei Kuagong did not leave, they could only continue to wait. Now the Rongjun King, as soon as it came, everyone also went in. Seriously counting the incident, this is earlier than the time when the palace banquet entered the palace before. It's not that the big man in front deliberately delayed it, but the situation had to be like this. Wei Kuagong came first, he was embarrassed to go first, so he had to take someone with him, or wait for someone who was more valuable than him, or someone with high morals to walk in front, and Kuagong came. Kuagong, however, he and Rongjun Wang are not separated from Meng, and Meng is not separated from Qiao, so they have to wait for Rongjun Wang, and other things, so that the people behind can only wait. It is said that these big men should talk a little longer today, and wait for Yanjun equal people, but Rongjun Wang said that he can go in, and everyone can go in without basking in the sun and waiting. You must know that the palace banquet starts at Yujhan, around 6 p.m., and it is only Shenqi, around 3 p.m. Even if it is Mid-Autumn Festival, the sun at Shenqi is very hot. Mu Yangling can bring a maid in, and there will be a maid beside her to fan her, but other wives don't have this kind of treatment. After arriving at Zhaoyang Hall, the queen sent people to invite Mu Yangling, Mrs. Xiao Xia and Mrs. Rong to rest in the side hall. Mu Yangling looked at Chi Heiran. Chi Heiran had already hugged the little bear to recognize people, and there were compliments and praises everywhere he passed. Mu Yangling twitched his mouth, hesitated for a while and said, "I won't go, you take Mrs. and Mrs. Wei go." Xiao Xia and Madame Rong looked at Chi Heiran and Xiao Xiang, their eyes flashed, and they said goodbye to Mu Yangling with a slight smile. Mu Yangling sat helplessly on the high platform, watching Chi Heiran showing off his son everywhere, and seeing the eyes of everyone secretly looking at her. Mu Yangling couldn't help showing a little pride on his face. In fact, Chi Heiran was right, his son is indeed very powerful and well behaved. Her eyes swept down unintentionally, and she saw Mrs. Xia sitting in the middle, and Mu Yangling was taken aback. Xia's complexion was pale, her figure was thin, and she was no longer as cheerful as before, as if she had suffered a serious illness. Mu Yangling sat up straight involuntarily, and looked at Fan Zijian, who was sitting diagonally opposite. Fan Zijian was lowering his head and talking to Rongxian. He didn't know what he said, and he laughed. Mu Yangling sighed slightly. In the end he still didn't say anything. The matter between their mother and son was totally unclear, unless Mrs. Xia figured it out for herself, or Fan Zijian took a step back, otherwise this matter would be over. Qi Heiran walked around with the little bear in his arms, came back full of ambition, handed the little bear to him, and said, "My son is thirsty, give him some water to drink." While feeding him water, Mu Yangling scolded Qi Heiran, "You always call people, can you not be thirsty? You also restrain yourself, don't end up tormenting others and tormenting your son instead." Qi Heiran snorted and said, "That's because you didn't see Mrs. Lu's face just now. Tell them that my son can't speak, my son speaks fluently." Mrs. Lu's face just now heard Xiao Xiong talking. As ugly as swallowing 10 flies. Mu Yangling knew that Qi Heiran brought the little bear in such a high-profile appearance to justify his son's name. Although he felt that this move was a bit naive, seeing the anger and pride on his face and the eagerness on his son's face, Mu Yangling had no choice but to hold back. "Stop it, forget it, let others be depressed, as long as the father and son are happy." Qi Heiran sat next to Mu Yangling, and took out a lot of jade pendants and rings from his arms and gave them to her, saying, "These are all gifts for their son, you take them for him." Little Bear looked at those things eagerly, and solemnly told his mother, "Be sure to keep them, they are all mine." Mu Yangling. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 718. Before the banquet started, Qi Heiran took the little bear all over the venue, and received countless compliments and greetings. Previously, the palace banquet was only held during the Chinese New Year. That time, because of frugality, the palace banquet was not held grandly. Both the officials and their family members were very simple. This Mid-Autumn Festival banquet is also a reception banquet for Dali envoys. Soon after the ceremony, it will be the national ceremony for the concubine Xian to be conferred and the eldest prince to be crowned prince, so the emperor and empress have changed from their usual frugality and become a lot more grand. Concubine Xian will also start to choose a concubine after being conferred in the harem. And families with beautiful daughters are very thoughtful, so the Mid-Autumn Festival banquet not only dresses up their daughters beautifully, but also tidy up themselves very decently. Since there will be young ladies who are waiting to be married at the banquet, it is natural that there will be young men who have not yet engaged. Everyone is dressed up very grandly, and naturally there are many accessories on their bodies, and none of them will be cheap. Everyone gave the meeting gift very painfully. The key is that Qi Heiran is too demanding, and they can't let them give the meeting gift willingly. Even if Xiaoshizi is really cute, it can't erase the showy smile on Qi Heiran's face. However, everyone saw that Qi Heiran deliberately hugged the little bear to look for Mrs. Lu, and hugged the little bear and asked Mr. Lu, "Does your little prince look like a dumb and fool?" Everyone pricked up their ears and waited for Master Lu's answer. Lu Taifu said with luck, "Of course, Xiao Shizi is not a fool or a dumb man. Those are just children's quarreling and unscrupulous words. I hope King Rong will not mind." Qi Heiran snorted coldly, and said, "Then next time my son quarrels with your grandson, can you also call him a bastard? Anyway, it's all about talking indiscriminately during the quarrel. Mrs. Lu, you are the prince and Mrs. he is also the director of the Imperial Academy, so he should know the principles of teaching and educating people. This child needs to be taught from an early age, especially by precept and example. Everyone looked at Mrs. Lu with a pale face, and instantly felt relieved, and felt that the meeting gift given before was still very worthwhile. Rong Xian shook his head when he saw it, then turned to Fan Zijian and said, "The Lu family has nothing to be afraid of. Do you still want to act like this? After all, it's just a child's play." The prestige of the Lu family has dropped sharply recently, and Qi Heiran's eyes were firmly attracted by Qi Heiran, and he paid attention to the affairs of concubine Feng Xian and the crown prince in his free time, but he didn't notice it. But Rong Xian was an onlooker, and he was most wary of the aristocratic family, so he naturally understood. Be clear. A cold light flashed in Fan Zijian's eyes, and he said, "Who said I was doing it for the little bear? Since Mrs. Lu dared to make trouble for us openly and secretly, they should bear the consequences." Obviously, he already knew about the embarrassment that Lu and other aristocratic families had made Qi Ziyuan embarrassing. Rong Xian frowned, looked at Qi Heiran, and asked uncertainly, "How ran?" Fan Zijian snorted, and said with a sneer at the corner of his mouth, "Without his instruction, how could my people travel so unimpeded in the local area? Who in Daki doesn't know that the eldest cousin raised Heiran as his son? Not to mention the magistrate, it is you, and Yan Xiang also has to give him 3 points." Rong Xian sighed, "Haoran has also grown up. In the past few days, he has not revealed any traces of his actions. Everyone thinks that he is just messing around with Lu Shi, and only pretends to prevent Lu Shi from stepping down to avenge his son's insults. But now it seems that he has already united with Fan Zijian to restrict the Lu family and other aristocratic families from the root. Perhaps it was not accidental that the emperor and the empress said those words back then. Now that the Lu family, the Wang family and the Zheng family are doing things independently, no one has noticed the private actions of Qi Heiran and Fan Zijian, but if their alliance is still there, Qi Heiran and Fan Zijian, how could it be possible to hide it from them?" Fan Zijian said, "1 yard counts for 1 yard. The bear's matter is not a big deal. It's just the children fighting." Heiran didn't want to intervene. He taught Lu Ji a lesson and let him teach his son well, so he passed it. But it was their bad luck. Well, if Aling hadn't mentioned it, we wouldn't know they dared to dig a hole for the emperor. Fan Zijian sneered, "Back then when we were in Baidi, Heiran and I were still white, so we didn't see my cousin being bullied. Now that my cousin is the emperor, he is being bullied to the face instead. If it wasn't for Mrs. Rong, it would be fine. I thought Brother Rong was replaced by someone." Rong Xian looked gentle and elegant. He often brought Fan Zijian and Qi Heiran to dig holes for those who bullied Qi Ziyuan. He was bad from the root. Seeing that he was full of resentment, Rong Xian laughed and said, "You also said that this is not Baidi. The emperor is no longer a general of the Baidi, but the emperor, the former. If he loses, he will go to the battlefield, maybe he will fight back. No, it's not good. The worst is to go home and farm, but for the latter, if you lose, everything will be nothing. You, me, Heiran, the whole family, no one will exist, and our ambitions will become a joke." Rong Xian looked at Fan Siwen's position, raised his chin, and said, "It's like you and him can't be broken up if you want to. It's not that you don't have a better way these years, but why are none of them useful? Instead procrastinating so much that you almost killed yourself." Fan Zijian's face turned cold, and Rong Xian sighed, "The way of the world is not only about the way of life, but the most important thing is the word of love. People can't understand this thing, so they come up with a way of life. Where do you need sophistication? You can go directly to become a monk. The emperor often asks me to pay attention to you. Why doesn't the emperor tell me to pay attention to Heiran? Because although that kid can cause troubles, most of them are only outsiders. No matter how serious the troubles are, Dali is on our side. As long as we are united, we can always get through, but you are different, you thoughtful and too smart. When you are hurt, you will lick yourself. Once something happens, it will either destroy the people you are close to, or destroy yourself. The emperor often told me that the three brothers, he is most worried about you. It's Harren, with Aling by his side. No matter how big the disaster is, there will be a limit. Fan Zijian bowed his head and remained silent. Rongxian just took a sip of tea, stopped talking about this topic, but nodded to Fan Muxia and said, even if she has selfish intentions, her heart towards you is not fake. Whether she should be cruel or not, should she be kind or not, there are always times when you regret it. The emperor pities you and can't bear to talk about you, but I want to remind you, the tree wants to be quiet but the wind doesn't stop. Don't wait until things are irreversible to regret. Fan Zijian's complexion changed, and he looked at his mother who was sitting on the fourth-rank official seat below. Fan Zijian always blamed Xia for not being cruel to Fan Siwen, always putting his son behind her husband, whether he should be cruel or not, and whether he should be kind or not, in order to please his father and even put him at a disadvantage. But why isn't he like this? If he decides to throw Fan Siwen into the abyss, making him unable to ask his mother to do anything for him, then the Xia family will naturally not face a choice again, and naturally they will not abandon him to choose again. Fan Siwen. But why? Fan Zijian just couldn't help thinking, why did he have to cut off his own way to get the maternal love he deserved? The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 719. Seeing his expression, Rongxian shook his head slightly. Anyway, he wouldn't be so entangled. He was persecuted by his stepmother when he was young. His father not only ignored him, but also took the initiative to drive him out of the house. But now his father not only begged him to go back, he was also submissive in front of him, and he never gave his father a chance to threaten or beg him. And there were never any rumors of discord between him and his father outside, but they felt that their father was kind and filial, and got along very well. Rongxian also felt that this kind of treatment was the best. He had no intention of torturing them, but he would not let them take advantage of him. In Rongxian's view, the reason why Fan Zijian was so entangled was because his requirements were too high. How could there be so many pure feelings in this world? Fan Zijian's face changed, and the Xia family below turned his head to look this way as if feeling something, and sighed slightly when he saw Fan Zijian sitting on it with his head down. She turned her head to look at Fan Siwen, who was still sullen, as if she was still angry about the quarrel this morning. It seems that since Fan Siwen decided to give Fan Zixiao his favor, Zijian could not help arguing with his father when they met, and it was the same this morning. The son and daughter-in-law finally came back, but they haven't said a word yet. They started arguing again. In fact, Fan Siwen didn't say anything at that time, but just routinely asked about Aunt Su who he gave to his son. Xiaoxi faintly felt that the reason why her son was so angry was because she also intervened in Aunt Su's affairs. Xiaoxi was thinking wildly, when a servant carefully walked up to her and whispered, "Madam Fan, the emperor invites you to meet in the palace." Fan Siwen was startled, and crossed her and asked, "What is the emperor's business?" Now, depending on the time, the palace banquet is about to begin. The servant lowered his head and said, "I don't know about this miscellaneous family. I just came to invite my wife according to the emperor's order." Fan Siwen really wanted to get up and go with Mrs. Xia, but the emperor only invited Mrs. Xia, not him. He could only suppress his temper, nodded to Mrs. Xia and said, "Since the emperor invites you, then you can go." Mrs. Xia nodded, got up and followed the servants to the back hall quietly. When someone noticed, they whispered, "It seems that the emperor still misses this aunt's old love." Of course I read it. It was probably because of Nkuagong's attitude that I was a little colder. It's strange for me to say that Xia's nephew is the emperor, and her son is the duke of the state. No matter how hard she lives, she is caught by Fan Yuxi. She looks like she has a serious illness. Your Majesty didn't even ask the imperial doctor to see it. That's why the word intercede hurts people. Even though Xia is old, she still has the heart of a little girl. Xia didn't hear the discussion behind her. She followed the servant and turned a few turns to a palace. Surprised, I couldn't help but shed tears, big brother, second brother. At this time, the servant in charge of calling Chi Heiran's family was sweating profusely following Chi Heiran, with his arms full of the bear's meeting gifts. Chi Heiran looked regretfully at the place where the female relatives gathered, and felt embarrassed to go there, so he could only bow his head and whisper to his son, "Son, after you go back, I will pester your mother to take you there to greet some old ladies, the things on them are better." Little Bear's eyes were shining, and he nodded repeatedly, looking like he wanted to go now. The servant was so anxious that he was sweating profusely, and finally had the time to finish his sentence. "My lord, the emperor announced that you will meet in the back hall, look." Chi Heiran looked up at the time, and asked, "The palace banquet is about to start, why are you going to the back hall?" The servant is about to cry, and you know that the palace banquet is about to start? Seeing that you are still unsatisfied, you can't wait to walk around Zhaoyang Palace again, right? When he came to Chi Heiran's side, his hand was stuffed before he could say a word, and then he followed Chi Heiran back and forth among the adults without stopping for a moment, until now he had the chance to speak. The waiter bent down wanting to cry but without tears. "Please hurry up, Wang Ye, you see that Dukan has gone." Chi Heiran blinked, pointed to the upper seat and asked, "Isn't Mr. N still there?" The servant turned his head to look, and saw that Mr. N was still sitting there. He was surprised for a moment, and hurriedly searched around him, only to find that there was no servant beside him. He couldn't help but slightly frowned, and was about to say something when there was the sound of a whip outside. "The emperor is coming." The servant froze, and hurriedly stood behind Chi Heiran respectfully. Although Chi Heiran doubted him, seeing that he had no intention of avoiding him, he felt relieved and returned to his seat with the little bear in his arms. Mu Yangling was sitting on the mat, with only a small bag beside him. Chi Heiran was watching the waiter from the corner of his eyes, and he didn't pay attention, but the little bear's face changed, and he rushed to touch the bag. His mouth couldn't help but shrunk, and shouted, "No, it's much less." The voice is not loud, but it can be heard by the people in the upper and lower seats. Mu Yangling quickly stretched out his fingers and hush, and said in a low voice, "There are too many things, mother can't fit here, so mother asked Li Shun to get you brother Xiaobao left it there, and we will pick it up when we leave. Otherwise, how decent would it be to put so many things on their seats?" Only then was Xiao Xiang satisfied, and carefully stuffed the meeting gift he got into the little bag. Mu Yangling heard Shenjia's voice getting closer, and hurriedly stuffed things into it, and knelt down with the bear in his arms. Qi Xiaoyuan's wife and children are only Li Jinghua and Xiaobao, so his seat belongs to Qi Heiran, and directly opposite is the guest seat, which belongs to Dali Prince Duan Saiwen and his younger sister Duan Yuking. That's why Mu Yangling knelt down, and from the corner of his eyes, he saw a bright yellow, and knew that it was Qi Xiaoyuan who had come. Qi Heiran felt Qi Xiaoyuan glaring at him fiercely, and was a little puzzled, when he heard his elder brother's mellow voice say, "Everyone, get up." Qi Heiran stood up and looked up, his eyes popped out suddenly, and he said in surprise, "Eldest uncle, second uncle, why are you here?" Zhu Qing just smiled at Qi Heiran and didn't speak, but Zhu Feng motioned him to see the emperor, giving him a self-seeking expression. Qi Xiaoyuan glared at his younger brother, then turned his head and smiled at the two uncles. "Uncles, take your seats first." The palace people immediately arranged 2 seats under Qi Heiran. Zhu Qing glanced at Fan Zijin who was opposite, and said in a low voice, "Your 2 aunts are here too, and they are talking to your aunt in the back hall. The emperor sent someone here looking for you and Zijin, why don't you 2 cousins go over?" Qi Heiran rubbed his nose in embarrassment, glanced at the waiter behind him, saw that he was drenched in cold sweat, and said, "It's my nephew who was delayed by something, don't blame uncle, I will pay you 3 bowls of wine later." You should think about how to explain to the emperor. In order to wait for you, the emperor almost delayed the palace banquet. Zhu Feng gloated. Zhu Qing glared at his younger brother and comforted Qi Heiran, "It's okay, the emperor just wanted to give you a surprise, and he won't mind too much. No wonder I didn't say in advance that the uncles are coming. This is not a surprise, it's a complete shock, okay." The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 720. But he was delayed because he was busy receiving the gift. Why did Zijin delay it? Qi Heiran looked at Fan Zijin, who was diagonally opposite, and seeing that he also had surprise on his face, he knew that he didn't know that the uncles were coming, so he blinked and winked at him. Fan Zijin frowned slightly. Here, Mu Yangling got up again with the little bear, and saluted the 2 uncles. Zhu Qing hurriedly helped and said, "Princess, please come up, I dare not be your gift." Qi Heiran laughed and said, "Uncle, she is the princess, but she is also your niece and daughter-in-law, why not? I will kowtow to you later, we like the gift you gave when we got married, and we haven't had time to give it to you. Kowtow to my aunts." The Mid-Autumn Palace banquet is both a state banquet and a family banquet, but the country is greater than the family. So Qi Ziyuan raised his glass to welcome the arrival of the Dali envoys, formally greeted them, and then wished the people all over the world a happy reunion, and then accompanied his courtiers to have a drink. Then he mentioned the 2 uncles. Zhu Qing and Zhu Feng were specially invited back by Qi Ziyuan. Firstly, the 2 were senior generals guarding Fuzhou. They were originally on the list of the Crown Prince's acceptance ceremony. This time, they came early this time because of the Mid-Autumn Festival reunion. We haven't spent much of the Mid-Autumn Festival together, and the second is for rewards. Qi Ziyuan decided to seal the 2 uncles as Marquis of Dongning and Marquis of Zhenhai. Everyone knows that Qi Ziyuan is able to have today because of the help of the 2 uncles of the Zhu family. With such a father, if it weren't for the uncle's support, it would be difficult for Qi Ziyuan to survive. How can we talk about such a great achievement? So no one raised any objections at this time. Qi Ziyuan was very satisfied with this, so he threw out the suffix of Lord Ho, hereditary without replacement. Only then did everyone become lively, and looked at Zhu Qing and Zhu Feng enviously. Qi Shaosheng and Qi Saitai sitting in the lower seats couldn't help but red eyes. They are still Qi Ziyuan's blood brothers. It's fine if they don't have real power. The glory of the Marquis mansion will be guaranteed to them for this life. Feeling. But hereditary succession is not the same, unless you wish your family to die to rebel, or future generations will be enshrined as lords and enjoy the glory of the lords. Qi Heiran and Fan Zijin did not add hereditary replacements because everyone knew that their rewards had not yet come to an end, and when it did, a hereditary replacement would not be able to escape, and Rongxian had a great possibility to get this award. The hereditary replacement at the founding of the country is also different from the reappointment of later emperors. The former means real power, while the latter, whether real or not, depends not only on the ability of the descendants, but also on the mood of the emperor in power. Everyone was jealous, but their faces were full of smiles, and they raised their glasses to Zhu Qing and Zhu Feng respectfully. Only then did Yan Du suddenly realize, no wonder the seat was inserted in front of him, such a reward was of just the right grade. Tonight, the prince and princess of Dali are the protagonists. Duan Siwen has handed in the credentials before, and at this time, taking advantage of the presence of all the ministers, he once again expresses the meaning that the 2 countries will be peaceful forever, and that Dali is the only country that looks after Daki. Qi Ziyuan once again expressed his acceptance, and the conversation was pleasant for a while. During this period, Duan Yuqing has been sitting under Duan Siwen with her head down, with a slight smile on her face. Although she didn't say a word, She has always been the focus of the audience, because one of the purposes of everyone's trip is to see this future concubine Xian. The purpose of Dali is to allow the emperor to meet their princess, so Duan Yuking was asked to dress up to attend, and she just needs to sit there beautifully without words. Qi Ziyuan didn't look at Duan Yuking. Qi Heiran didn't know, anyway. He glanced at it several times, and then curled his lips in his heart, thinking that he was not half as good as Aling, and glanced at those who whispered praises to Duan Yuking, feeling that their eyes were different. Question. It was not only Qi Heiran who felt that there was something wrong with their eyes, but also Xiao Xiang. Little Xiang moved to his mother's side and said in a low voice, "Mother, they lie, you are the most beautiful," and then the ant sitting in the 9th seat. The 9th seat is the seat of Kui's family. Mu Yangling glanced down, and sure enough, he saw a beautiful little girl there. Mu Yangling flashed this thought first, and then looked at his son in surprise. Qi Heiran was also surprised. He felt ecstasy and worry in his heart, and asked in a low voice, "Son, can you hear them?" Xiao Xiang nodded as it should, and emphasized again, "Mother is the most beautiful." Mu Yangling and Qi Heiran looked at each other, worry flashed across their eyes. They did not ask any further questions in a tacit understanding, just rubbed the little bear's head, and said with a smile, "It's good that my son thinks mother is the most beautiful." The palace banquet ends at the 3rd quarter of Suhan, about 20:45, and the palace is closed at Haishi, around 9 p.m. When everyone was still watching the singing and dancing, Little Bear fell asleep, and Mu Yangling hugged him in his arms, and a court lady came over and whispered, "My lady, Queen Mother, please take the little prince to the back hall to rest." After a pause, he said, "His Royal Highness is also going to the back hall, and the Empress entrusts the Empress to take care of him." Mu Yangling looked at the seat, and saw that although Xiaobao was still sitting upright, his eyes were already narrowed, and Qi Ziyuan supported him with a big hand. Mu Yangling nodded slightly, hugged the little bear and got up, nodded slightly to greet Qi Heiran, and then went to the apse. Someone helped Xiaobao over. Mu Yangling saw him staggering, and was afraid that he would fall if he wobbled on his feet. However, in order to let him maintain the majesty of the eldest prince, the maids around him only supported him and did not hug him. Mean. Mu Yangling frowned slightly. Even if Xiaobao wanted to be the prince, he was only 1 or 4 years old now. Mu Yangling stepped forward and bent down to pick him up, turned around and left, lead the way ahead. The maid and servant who supported Xiaobao breathed a sigh of relief, and hurriedly walked ahead to lead the way. Mu Yangling hugged one in each hand, and walked all the way to the Wanking Palace before stopping. Mu Yangling was slightly surprised and asked, "Why are you here?" When Kui stood at the door and said with a smile, "Greetings to the princess, you are finally here." When Kui stepped forward and hugged the eldest prince in her arms, led Mu Yangling to walk in, and said with a smile, "This is all the emperor's order," saying that it was too late for the palace banquet to end, and it was too hard for the little prince to go back and forth, so let him go back and forth. The empress tidied up the Wanking Palace for you and the prince to live in temporarily. He said again, "Not only you, Mrs and Kuagong was also arranged to live in the Shiyuanzai next door, and she will live in the palace tonight. The 2 uncles of the country have also been arranged to live in the West Palace, which is now the empty palace. There are only 3 masters, so if you dare to keep so many people at once, you won't dare in the future." Mu Yangling asked, "Why don't you go to Zayahua Palace?" Zayahua Palace is the palace that Qi Ziyuan arranged for Qi Heiran in the palace, so that he can stay in the palace when he has no time to leave the palace. Sometimes Li Jinghua wants to talk to Mu Yangling, and Xiao Xiang also stays directly when he wants to come to live in the palace. To Zayahua Palace, it can be said that Zayahua Palace is equivalent to their second home. When Kui said cryptically, "I'm afraid that the emperor will have something to say to the prince at night, Zayahua Palace will go down the palace gate at night, and it will be difficult to come and go." Mu Yangling nodded and stopped asking. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 721. Although the Wonking Palace is a side hall of the Cunning Palace, it is far away from the main hall of the Cunning Palace. Standing at the door, the trees are lush and the road is curved, and only the raised corners of the main hall can be seen. When Kui sent Mu Yangling to the inner hall and was about to hug the eldest prince to say goodbye. Seeing that it was windy and foggy outside, Mu Yangling said, "Why don't you just stay here and let him sleep with the little bear? What should I do if I catch a cold while being hugged around?" The eldest prince always sleeps on the same bed with the young prince when he leaves the palace, and when the young prince enters the palace, he usually rests with the eldest prince. When Kui arranged the eldest prince next to the young prince without much hesitation, Mu Yangling took off the heavy dresses for the two children, covered them with a big quilt, and was about to ask about Chi Heiran, when the servant in front came to report that the palace banquet was over, and the emperor called Rong Junwang and Nkuagong. Study. When Mu Yangling asked about Xiao Xia, the maid smiled and said, "Mrs. Nkuagong has already rested, Wang Fei can rest assured, Madam is served by her usual old mother." Knowing that she was referring to Nanny Xia, Mu Yangling immediately felt relieved, and fell asleep peacefully holding the two children. And tonight, in the entire palace, except for Mu Yangling and the two children, only Xiao Xia slept soundly, and everyone else suffered from insomnia and kept their eyes open until dawn. Xia Shi hadn't appeared at the palace banquet since she arrived in the apse. At this moment, her eyes were red and swollen, with slap marks on her face, and she looked at Zhu Qing in a daze. Aunt Zhu sighed, stepped forward to support Xia, and said in a low voice, "Don't blame your elder brother, this child Zijin is too distressed, you mother." And Qi Ziyuan drove Qi Heiran to sleep outside the study, and had a long talk with Fan Zijin all night. "I always think this is a regret in your heart, and you have to solve it yourself, but for more than a year, the relationship between you and your aunt it's not good, but it's even worse than before. Only the family can govern the country. You have to arrange the family affairs well so that you can focus more on the state affairs. Zijin, even if there is no aunt, Heiran, and I will always envy you, at least, my aunt is always there, and Heiran's mother and I." On the other hand, Li Jinghua was investigating why the servant did not invite Qi Heiran and Fan Zijin to the apse. The servant who went to invite Qi Heiran knelt on the ground tremblingly, almost crying, "Slave, I went to invite King Rong, but I didn't have time to speak, I just went to hold a meeting gift for King Rong." The corners of Li Jinghua's mouth twitched. Obviously, she already knew what happened before. Too many people have seen this matter, and it is difficult to find out, so she just asked a simple question and waved, "It is not good for you, and you will be fined for half a year's salary, step down." The waiter breathed a sigh of relief, and bowed his head sincerely before retreating. Only then did Li Jinghua look to invite Fan Zijin's servant. What she was curious about was that he didn't invite Fan Zijin. Li Jinghua squinted his eyes at him, saw that he was also trembling, and his face turned pale, so he asked, "What about you?" The maid kowtowed and said, "Slave, I got lost on the road." "Can you get lost from the back hall to the front hall?" Li Jinghua couldn't help but pat the table and said, "Why doesn't this palace know that you are still a road idiot?" The servant tremblingly said, "The slaves are not serving in the Zhaoyang hall, they were sent from the clothes bureau because of the lack of manpower in the Zhaoyang hall, and they were only used to guard the candles in the back hall, but the father-in-law suddenly sent the slaves to the front hall to inform Angwo Lord." The servant clearly saw the distance, but got lost halfway, and didn't know where he went. There was no one on the road, so he could only wander around. It was because the maid in charge of the side hall found the servant, and the servant came out. Li Jinghua looked at the steward's father-in-law and steward's nanny who were kneeling beside him. Both of them confirmed that the servant was not lying, but at the same time, no one knew where he was doing or what he was doing during the hour when he was lost. Li Jinghua rubbed her forehead. This is the disadvantage of lack of manpower. There are few masters in the palace, and there are more than enough people to serve at ordinary times, but once there is a big palace banquet, there is not enough manpower, even the maids serving in her palace have to be sent out to help. Li Jinghua looked down at the servant, but always felt a little weird. Wen Kui came in from the outside, and said in a low voice, "Madam, it's getting late, you have to entertain the uncles and wives tomorrow morning, you should rest first. Take care of the person and check tomorrow." At night, Li Jinghua couldn't sleep, she always felt a little uneasy. She turned over and asked, "The emperor is still in the imperial study?" Wen Kui, who was on her feet, immediately came to her senses. Yes, when the maidservant turned off the lights, the servants in front were talking back and forth, saying that the weight in the imperial study room hadn't been turned off yet. "Where's little treasure? I don't know if he slept soundly in Wanking Palace." Wen Kui smiled and said, "Your Majesty, don't worry, with the concubine and Madame Wang here, the first prince will not be wronged." Li Jinghua replied in a daze, turned over and fell asleep in a daze. Wen Kui waited for a long time and saw that she was silent and fell asleep with her eyes closed. She closed her eyes when she felt that she heard a scream from outside. Wen Kui jumped up. "Raise the curtain." Li Jinghua was also awakened. She didn't sleep much all night, so she asked with a headache, "What's going on outside?" "Slaves, let's go take a look." Wen Kui trotted out, frowned and looked outside, saw the noise in the East Hall, which was the living room of the first prince, and said displeasedly, "What's going on? There is so much noise in Cunning Palace, the first prince is in the hall. Do you dare to do this when you live?" A court lady put on clothes for her, surrounded her and went to the east side hall together. Wang Momo stumbled out, threw herself at Wen Kui's legs, pointed to the inner room and said, "Miss Wen Kui, dead, dead." Wen Kui's complexion changed drastically, and she passed her and walked quickly to the inner room, and pulled open the curtain with a shua. A 13 or 14-year-old maid's eyes were wide open, and she fell on the table bleeding from all 7 orifices. Looking at Wen Kui's hands trembled slightly, and she went up to touch her breath, but there was no breath, and the skin on her face was slightly cold. It seemed that she had been dead for a while. Wen Kui looked around, and saw a bundle on one side of the couch, with various jade pendants, jade rings and other accessories scattered on it. She fixed her eyes and asked, "Where is what?" Wang Momo was brought in by someone, and she cried, "It was sent by Miss Le Shun, who said it was a meeting gift received by the young prince. First put it here with the eldest prince, and then take it when he leaves the palace. This servant is thinking about it. The things of the eldest prince and the little prince have been mixed, so people sent them to the palace of the eldest prince." Wen Kui's face was condensed, and he said, "Everyone who entered this house yesterday and today is locked up, and nothing in the house is allowed to move. Anyone who violates the order will be regarded as conspiracy." The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 722. Li Jinghua broke into the inner room directly, and saw Xiaobao and Xiaoxiang sleeping in a mess, probably because he was disturbed. He turned over directly, smashed his mouth, put his little foot against Xiaoxiang's mouth, tilted his head and continued sleep. Li Jinghua breathed a sigh of relief. Mu Yangling had already sat up and put on his clothes, and asked confusedly, "Sister-in-law, why are you here so early?" Seeing that Mu Yangling didn't know anything, Li Jinghua's eyes turned red, and she couldn't help sobbing, "Aling, you have to help me." Li Jinghua was frightened by the appearance of the little palace maid bleeding from 7 orifices in the East Hall. If Xiaobao hadn't stayed in Wanking Hall last night, would the person she saw bleeding from 7 orifices today be her son? Just thinking about it, Li Jinghua felt that the blood in her whole body was condensed, and she subconsciously asked for help from the people around her. Mu Yangling woke up in a jerk, looked back at the two children first, then pulled Li Jinghua out, and asked, "What happened?" At the same time, Qi Ziyuan, who had just woken up, shattered the table in front of him with a single palm. Qi Heiran's face was also ashen, and his clenched fists revealed the anger in his heart. Fan Zijian glanced at the two of them, and asked the leader of the guards who came to report, "Has the matter spread?" The leader of the guards looked up at the emperor, saw that he was also frowning and looked at him, and hurriedly said, "And when Kui blocked the news immediately, because the matter involved the eldest prince, I don't know if the villain is still hiding in the palace, so I found him Liao Chen. The most important thing is that there is a palace lock between the harem and the imperial study room. Except for the patrolling guards, the inner eunuchs and court ladies are not allowed to move around without an edict. It is not yet time to open the door, and the emperor's most reliable person must be notified inside. Lu Jin is him." The emperor obviously thought of this, and immediately stood up, "Show the Cunning Palace." When the three arrived at the East Hall of Cunning Palace, Mu Yangling and Li Jinghua were already there. The people serving in the East Hall were all detained separately in groups of 5, and Wen Kui is now interrogating who among them had entered the East Hall yesterday. Mu Yangling was surveying the scene. She picked up the little maid's hand and looked at it. Her eyes slid over the teacup and incense burner, and finally she saw the meeting ceremony of the little bear. Li Jinghua was still trembling a little, and she said with a pale face, "The people around Xiaobao are all chosen by me and the emperor, and eating is the most important thing, because children are not good at incense. The incense burner in the room is just for the decoration. I can't guess where there are any loopholes. Is the doctor here? I've already asked someone to make an announcement, and it's probably coming soon." Li Jinghua looked up and saw Qi Ziyuan and the others come in, and hurriedly bowed his knees to salute. Qi Ziyuan waved his hand and looked at Mu Yangling, "When did you die?" "It should be around midnight last night, and you have to ask Wuzhou for a more accurate time." Qi Ziyuan stepped forward to see the appearance of the little maid, frowned and said, "Bleeding from the 7 orifices is extremely poisonous." Mu Yangling nodded, "The tea on the table shows signs of being used. I don't know if it is poisonous. I have to wait for the imperial doctor to test it." Qi Heiran walked around the room, frowned and said, "Xiao Bao's food has always been strictly guarded, it may not be easy to poison the tea. He always felt that there was something weird in the house." Mu Yangling nodded, she thought so too. The imperial doctor came over quickly, checked the corpse and the tea and said, "The man was poisoned by Yinghong. The poison sees blood sealing the throat. It is very poisonous. I found some poison on the edge of the teacup, but there is no in the tea." In addition, Chen also found a large amount of poisonous powder on her hand, which should have been ingested by mistake while drinking tea. The wonderful thing is that Yinghong not only can be poisoned when taken orally, but also penetrates into the body after long-term contact with the skin. Although the effect is slow, once infiltrated blood is hard for gods to save. Mu Yangling carefully inspected the little maid's hand, and there was nothing powdery on it. The imperial doctor explained, "This is another characteristic of Yinghong." The imperial doctor applied for some mercury from the imperial hospital. He applied the mercury to the teacup and the maid's hand, and some white fluorescence appeared on it immediately. Yinghong is red when it is powder, but once soaked in water, it becomes colorless. After the poisonous water is smeared and dried, it will fluoresce if it is applied with mercury. Soaking in water will give off a faint smell of grass, and after drying, the smell will be heavier, and now there is a faint smell of grass in the room, and this is what I deduce from the symptoms of the little maid and the little palace lady, that she is suffering from blush." A cold light flashed in Qi Ziyuan's eyes, and he asked, "Where did this little maid come into contact with Yinghong? This has to be checked again." Qi Ziyuan waved his hand to let them go to investigate, and took the lead to go to Cunning Palace, His face was somber. Anyone who didn't sleep much all night would not look good when he woke up and learned such news. Because the eldest prince was involved, the emperor and empress were sitting in the town in person, and the ministers leading the guards and the imperial physician did not dare to neglect, and with the help of Eunuch Wei and Eunuch Wan, they quickly found out about it. The poison came in mixed with the little bear's meeting gift. Now even Rong Jun Wangfu is also involved. Qi Ziyuan's expression turned ugly, and he said, "Give me a thorough investigation." Qi Heiran shrank his neck when he thought of the huge amount of meeting ceremony. At that time, he was a little complacent and forgot about his appearance. Let Xiao Xiang go to say hello to everyone he knew or not. The palace banquet only invited officials of the third rank and above and their families, plus dignitaries and some aristocratic families invited by friendship. There were quite a few people. Qi Heiran really couldn't remember who gave what. He handed the things to Mu Yangling directly, and Mu Yangling packed them in a bundle, and when it was full, he handed it to Li Shun, and asked her to send it to Xiaobao with a maid, and they would take it away later. Because Xiao Xiang lives with Xiaobao when he enters the palace, there is actually a room of Xiao Xiang in Xiaobao's East Hall, which contains all kinds of daily necessities. It is said that it is sent to Xiaobao, but in fact it is to be sent to Xiao Xiang in the East Hall. In the room, Qi Heiran personally handled every part of the meeting ceremony, and the imperial physician checked that there was no poison on his hands, unless he had washed them. The 4 people present except Li Jinghua knew how lazy Qi Heiran was. No one forced him, he had nothing to do to wash his hands after eating, so Qi Ziyuan directly suspected that the poison was stuffed in later. There were 5 things in the meeting ceremony that were contaminated with poison. The imperial physician directly selected a jade ring according to the concentration, and said, "The poison was placed in this jade ring, and the other 4 were stained after contact with the jade ring. The concentration is not high. The maid should be a friend. This jade ring or these things, after drinking tea, accidentally touched my mouth with my hand and inhaled the poison." Qi Ziyuan looked at Qi Heiran, and asked, "Who gave this jade ring? Do you have any impression? Or, was this thing stuffed in later? There are so many things, men don't give jade pendants, jade rings or finger rings, how can he remember so many things?" Qi Heiran peeked at his elder brother, shrinking his neck. Qi Ziyuan snorted coldly, and said to the leader of the guards, "Go and find out who can touch the things from the time when Princess Rongjun leaves to the time when she enters the East Hall."